We're back on Inside USA, where this week we're looking beyond Wall Street to some U.S. communities where the economic crisis has been building for years. The city of Baltimore is just a short drive from the center of political power here in the nation's capital. It was once a booming port and one of the country's greatest cities. Today, Baltimore is home to 30,000 vacant houses, a heroin epidemic, and a scary murder rate. When we visited Baltimore earlier this year, we found many people struggling just to survive. But we also found those who are building communities of resistance, those who are fighting back. If there's one thing you can't avoid in Baltimore, it's nostalgia. Once America's second leading destination for immigrants, mainly the Irish, Baltimore became America's third largest city. Later, it was a major shipping and manufacturing hub. Today, the port is a shadow of its former self. Industry has fled, and the population has been in decline for decades. The economic hardship and racial disparity here are major factors in Baltimore's notorious crime statistics. Nearly 300 murders a year, linked to a heroin trade that fuels a similar number of deaths by overdose. The murder rate here is nearly 7 times the U.S. national rate, making Baltimore more deadly than Bogota. But there are no statistics or context that can fully convey the reality of violent crime, the effects of which are always intensely personal.
I think about him every day. It's not a day that I don't think about him.
Jean Carter lost her son Jamel to a sudden, random, and still unsolved shooting. He was home for a weekend from college, hanging out with friends from the old neighborhood. Sitting in a car on an autumn evening, someone walked up to the window and shot him at close range.
I just can't imagine how someone can be so violent to just take someone's life like that. It's a lot of young people in the city just killing our young boys mostly.
Donnie is a former drug kingpin and convicted murderer.
And back in the day, I used to roam through here, do my little robberies and stuff like that.
He's now back on the streets after a long stretch in prison.
I only need help for 2 days to get to work. Every other church I've been to said, come back Monday.
I've been locked up about 19 times, you know, I did 2 big bits. The last one I did for murder. I was hooked up with a drug organization, we committed a murder, fighting over turf. I got to be life sentenced. I was one of the best drug dealers in the city, but it was born. It was born just sitting around, you know, selling stuff, collecting money, you know, sitting on the steps all day. You know, I think with me it was the excitement, you know, the excitement of seeing somebody's face when you pull the gun out, you know, especially you got the ones, yeah, I wish somebody would come over and try to rob me, and then all of a sudden you say, okay, let's give it up. You know, and then see the expression like, okay, you was a tough guy 5 minutes ago, what's up?
Eventually, Donnie got tired of the game. He turned state's witness and got a deal, but still served 18 years in jail. Along the way, he became friends with Ed Burns, a writer and TV producer who also happened to be the former cop who put Donnie away in the first place. And so, parts of Donnie's story have been immortalized. One of the main characters on the hit TV show The Wire is based on him, Omar Little.
And here I am. How about that?
In Donnie's new life, he's a community outreach worker and head of security at one of Baltimore's most important churches. Donnie counts Pastor Frank Reed as a close friend. As head pastor at the historic Bethel Church, he's one of the city's most visible black leaders.
When the people organize for change, then the politicians and the policy will change. And no matter how bad things look, if we begin to organize and turn to each other instead of turning on each other in violence and drug addiction, once we turn to each other, then we can change the politics and policy of our community.
Baltimore is a city that has gone through every fad in policing of the past 30 years. Most recently, the one known variously as the broken window, New York City, or zero tolerance model. The idea is to sweep through rough neighborhoods with a wave of quality of life arrests for drinking on the street, possession of drugs, and other nonviolent crimes. After years of this approach and a murder rate that hasn't budged, Baltimore's city government has turned on zero tolerance, but the culture of policing is slower to change.
It's a war every day. You know, it may not be like Iraq or other areas, okay, and we may not be able to wear the flak vests and ride down the street in tanks. Sometimes I wish we could. Might be a little safer, but it is a war out there. It's us against them.
Back at the church, we asked Pastor Reed about hope for change at the federal level. Baltimore is a longtime Democratic Party stronghold. Is the prospect of a new administration in Washington a source of any optimism?
The fact of the matter is, as great as those changes are, they won't make much of a difference in inner city areas until the people decide to make a change. The politics from the outside seldom make a real change.
Baltimore sits on the Chesapeake Bay, known across the U.S. for its seafood, especially the famous Chesapeake blue crab. On the tiny island of Tangier, the people who make their living catching that crab are facing an economic crisis that has nothing to do with Wall Street. They're getting slammed by the realities of global competition and the devastating effect of high gas prices and pollution. Tangier Island today is a wistful place. Nobody's coming to bail them out as they face the end of a way of life.
That's all I know. That's all I wanted to do. I graduated high school, that was as far as it went. I just wanted to get out on the water.
On Tangier Island in Chesapeake Bay, human livelihoods depend on a little blue crab. It pays the mortgage, puts food on the table. But the world has caught up with those who fish the Chesapeake Bay crab. Caught on the front lines of globalization and environmental mismanagement, people like Chuck Pruitt know that their way of life is fading.
Ow! They're trying to get me! Oh boy! I love the job, but it's getting so now, you know, it's getting harder every year to make a living. We have to work harder. The older I get, the harder I'm working, and that's not supposed to be. We've got foreign crab meat coming in from Indonesia, and their labor is so much cheaper than American labor, and they're able to sell it cheaper, and it's taking an impact on the selling the crab meat in this area.
Stocks of blue crab are dwindling, pollution and development contributing to the lowest crab harvests in decades. Add to that the price of fuel, and the equation is bleak.
Fuel prices is skyrocketed. Maybe 5 years ago we were paying like $1.50 a gallon. Now we're paying $4 a gallon. We're barely making it.
The town of Crisfield still calls itself the seafood capital of the world, but dozens of crab businesses have closed down, and the processing plants that once lined the waterfront have been replaced with luxury condos. The only plant left in Crisfield is Me Tompkins Seafood. It now imports 80% of its crab meat from Southeast Asia.
My grandfather would have understood it. He was a fisherman and he went where the fish were. The fish were in the upper bay, they went and fished the upper bay. When the fish are in the south bay, they fished the south bay. Only the distances have become greater. Where the crab is now in Asia, we go where the crab is.
Since 1995, the average crab consumption by Americans has almost doubled, an appetite that has to be fed. And so the U.S. market has been flooded with foreign crab meat, with imports tripling in the last 7 years.
It is a sign of the times that the amount of seafood produced in the United States is limited. Population is growing. As we become wealthier and demand more variety in our seafood products, it has to come from somewhere. So coming from overseas is a likely candidate.
For Tangier, the end of an era is tearing the very soul from a community. The island's population is at an all-time low.
If the water business dies out on Tangier Island will be destroyed.
As the United States descends into recession, those who fish crab already know what it feels like.
A lot of my friends is going off the water. The last 4 or 5 years, they're all going on tugboats.
But for Chuck and some others of his generation, change is not an option. There is only life on the bay as two endangered species play out the endgame together.
This is all I want to do till I die. This has always been my passion, crabbing.
That's all the time we have for this week's edition of Inside USA. From Washington, D.C., until next time, so long.